Hey there, my name is Chris Acton with Acton Creative, and this is a Handwoven Experience, episode 41. And in this episode, we're going to talk about buying weaving yarn. And we're going to get a little bit academic, so we might as well do it upright. So when you go to a website to buy weaving yarn, they're going to tell you all kinds of different information. And I just want to make sure that you understand what you're looking at so you can make a really good decision. So they'll start with, what is the fiber and what size is it? Is it wool? Is it cotton? Is it linen? Is it a blend? They'll tell you what the mix is. They'll also give you an idea of size. If it's a fatter yarn, it could be like a 3/2. If it's a really fine yarn, it could be a 20/2. They'll give you that information right out of the gates so that you know that you're in the ballpark. Secondly, where is it from? They'll tell you the manufacturer. Sometimes they'll even tell you the country where it's coming from, just to give you all the details. What format does it come in? Does it come in a tube or a cone? Those are the standard ones for weaving yarn. If you are looking for a smaller amount, they may sell it in a skein or a ball, like if you are a knitter or crocheter, they come in a smaller format. But weavers, cones and tubes, that's what we're dealing with. How much is on each? A pound or half pound. Those are pretty standard. This is a brand new one, haven't cracked into it. And this is a half pound, which is 8 ounces on a tube. This one, I'm sure I've used some of it, but it probably started as a pound. Pretty standard. How many yards make up a pound? Now this one, got to think about it for a second. So if you have a fat yarn like this, or say a really fine yarn like this, they're going to have very different numbers because 1 yard of this guy is going to weigh a lot more than 1 yard of this guy. So that's where how many yards make a pound come in handy, because as you're planning your project, you're going to know how many yards you need. That's a key one right there. What is the set? S-E-T-T, which refers to how close your warp yarns are spaced together. And they will give you a range, traditionally, that'll be what is your set for plain weave versus what is your set for twill. Twill is usually going to be set closer together. So that's an important one to look at too, because that will help you determine how you're planning your project with this yarn. And the last one, how do you treat it? Do you wash it in cold, let it air dry? There's all kinds of different variations on that for what is the best option for treating the fiber. So I took it one step further and I printed off a description from an actual fiber. This is from the Yarn Barn of Kansas. And I like their description because they had lots of information. So in this one, we're talking about a 10-2 pearl cotton. And pearl in this case is going to mean that it's been mercerized. So it's shiny versus an unmercerized, which is not shiny. 10-2 refers to the size yarn that it is. So they start off by saying that it's from Supreme UKI. Those are the folks making the yarn. Next one, 100% mercerized cotton. So it's all cotton. There's nothing else blended in. And it's mercerized, what I just mentioned. So it's going to be shiny instead of matte. Cones may vary in weight, generally 1 to 1.5 pounds. Now, it looks like the Yarn Barn of Kansas does something a little different than the other ones, where the other ones will say it's 1 pound, end of sentence. In this case, they probably have the ability to wind it on themselves, so they're not always exactly a pound. But that's what they're aiming for, is a pound on a cone. Remember we talked about that earlier. This is the cone. So it's going to look like this. 4,200 yards per pound. So that'll tell you how many yards are in a pound. Whew, see, got to think about this. Okay. The set is 24 to 30 EPI. EPI stands for ends per inch. And that refers to how closely your warp yarns are set together. So if you're doing a twill, you want to have them closer together, so you use the bigger number, the 30 ends per inch, versus plain weave, which is going to be 24 ends per inch. Are you with me? Hang in there. This one goes on to include a couple of other bits of information. 2-ply even spun, which refers to the actual format for how it was spun, the yarn is spun together. And then it talks about hand or machine wash on gentle, dry flat in lingerie bag in the dryer. So these are your treatment options, or what they recommend. Recommendation, that's the word I wanted to use. And that's a pretty extensive list. Now, below this on the website, they have a couple paragraphs that talk about a little more about how to use the yarn, what it's good for. They even refer to, if you need a smaller amount, to reach out to them and they could do something as small as 6 ounces, which is really nice to have that option. Typically, you'll get things, like I said, in a half-pound tube is very common, or a pound cone is pretty standard. So that is the big rundown, going from what the general descriptions are to seeing an actual example of what it looks like when you're shopping for weaving yarn. The whole purpose is that you are purchasing a yarn that is going to be right for your project, and something that you're going to enjoy, going to get good results from, because there's nothing worse than using a yarn that just doesn't quite work for what you intended it to. And it leads to a lot of frustration, and we want to avoid all of that. So I hope you learned a little something new today. If you have any questions, because I covered a lot, put them in the comments and I'll be sure to get back to you. But hopefully this will make you a much more confident buyer of weaving yarn. So until next time, my friends, have a great week. Happy weaving.